President Trump will join Republican lawmakers this week at their luncheon to help get tax reform done.
Trump is meeting with the congressional Big Four on the leadership.
It is going to get done. It has to get done for the American people. And I think Republican senators know that for their constituents, which is why I think you'll see them come together this week to get it done.
Embattled Senator Al Franken due to address the media over a growing list of women accusing him of inappropriate sexual behavior.
The Democrats are absolutely obsessed with power. Power matters to them. Morals and ethics go out the window.
The funeral for Texas Border Patrol agent Rogelio Martinez was this afternoon. Martinez died after suffering head injuries in an apparent attack last week while on patrol in a remote border area.
Mick Mulvaney has a new job despite still being in his old position. President Trump's tapped him to run the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
President Trump actually tweeted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, has been a total disaster as run by the previous administration's pick.
Mulvaney is the one who called the Bureau a joke. We could be looking at a legal battle here.
Wait, you can do it backwards, too.
Also important for viewers, I wish you guys could be here during the commercial breaks, but I was making fun of Griff earlier for raising the roof and saying that was a little outdated.
It's kind of a dad move.
And he has now Googled the top 13 dance moves. I guess it's number 8. So he is trying to justify raising the roof as somehow it's still
cool.
It's still a good thing to do.
Good morning. Thank you for having us in your living room this Sunday morning. To clear this up,
You did a
I
great
apologize
job,
we have
though,
to do
but
this first, but on the internet it says 13 timeless dance moves, number 8. I will put in there and read accurately, quote, done as a dance or celebration, this move is a guaranteed win.
You
Drop
can
the
justify
mic. Drop the
anything
mic.
on the internet. I think that's fake news. If you want to talk about, all right, well, let's move to real news. So we talk about.
Wait, if you have to look up on the internet,
Pete's not ready.
proof
Pete
to
is not
justify
ready.
your dance moves, it's not clear that you've won the argument.
Guaranteed win.
All
I've won
right,
the
once
argument.
again,
The
I'm
internet
in
is
the.
not always right.
But
Okay,
let me
so-
tell you, we got to move on. As Lisa is valiantly joining us on the couch, trying to move
really
this on.
trying to get on
because
this.
there is real
I did
news
bring
now
it
that,
up, though,
we've
so
cleared
that's
that
my
up,
fault,
and I was
sorry.
correct about the dance move. It is crunch time. Congress prepares to come back to tackle tax cuts, and they will hijack. But will they hijack the president's plan to help the American people? We had the legislative director for the White House, Mark Short, on in the last hour. Here is what he told us about crunch time.
When your margin is as thin as it is, unfortunately, we've not been able to earn support of Democrats. I think that's unfortunate. I think as you look at when you say that you're going to provide $2,000 in relief to those families earning $70,000 a year, it is targeted for middle-income families. When you're going to bring corporate relief to keep jobs in America, it's especially disappointing the Democrat senators across the Midwest who have seen companies flee their state. That's what's most disappointing to see they're not joining us.
Yeah, talk about a guy who's working hard, doesn't get a lot of vacation, even if there are only 12 legislative days between now and the end of the year. Lisa, you've worked on the Hill. Now, you say they're always working on the Hill. I say 12 days of work days is not that much.
No, it doesn't seem like it, but especially if you're in the House, you're always having to raise money everywhere you go. They always have constituent meetings when they're home. They actually do work pretty hard, although I know a lot of viewers, and Pete, don't agree with that. but the big deal this week is tax reform, and the Republicans have a ton on their plate. They've got tax reform. They've got a spending bill as well. There's still the issue of DACA, what to do with that. And then also what's been popped up recently as well on Capitol Hill is sexual harassment training and investigation. So Congress has a lot on their plate. They've not necessarily demonstrated that they are good at that. But tax reform's really at the forefront next week.
Maybe.
Potentially.
Don't overlook that spending bill, because you could have a government shutdown if they cannot fund the government on December 8th. That is coming. And that will throw everything into a tailspin.
You know,
that's a good point.
That's a great point. But the government shutdown it's white noise, it's background noise that folks out there have heard for years and years and years. Shutdown, debt ceiling, all the things that politicians do to shuffle the deck so they don't actually make tough decisions. The real deal, as we say, the closest crocodile to the canoe, the real thing is, can you do something actually substantive? Can you pass tax reform in a meaningful way? Republicans in the Senate, the House has done that. I think that other stuff, it's all important. It is important, because the reason we're even having this debate about tax reform is because of budgeting rules. You got to keep it under $1.5 trillion of potential deficit increase. I get all that. But still, what voters are going to care about is whether or not the big things actually ever happen.
Right, and they're worried about tax reform. And the big problem for Republicans is they only have 52 senators in the Senate for Republicans. They can only lose 2, with Vice President Pence being that tie-breaking vote. And there's 6 senators that have expressed concerns from a variety of reasons regarding the deficit. Senator Johnson concerns over the way small businesses are being treated with pass-through income. You also have the individual mandate with Senator Susan Collins expressing concern over that. So that's why this meeting next week with President Trump and Republican leaders and Republican conference is important, to try to hammer out some of these things, bring some of these Republican senators home in the hope that they can get this done.
To Pete's point, though, this is the bigger picture. We talk about the crunch deadline, all that stuff, and the pressure, and we're going to get to Mitch McConnell, whose reputation and job is essentially on the line. But at the end of the day, this is about much-needed tax relief for the American people. And many have suggested that what you saw in the midterm election in Virginia will be essentially a bloodbath if they cannot, the GOP Congress, deliver some much-needed tax relief for the American people. And that is what we're watching coming down.
Democrats are afraid that they fumble this ball, that Republicans fumble this handoff, which is such an easy layup to cut taxes for Republicans. It's their only hope for Democrats at the ballot box.
I kind of want to set this up because you guys were sort of going at it earlier. There are concerns about what Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's future looks like if they can't get tax reform done. I want to show you guys real quick at home. Eric Erickson joined us earlier, and he talked about this. So why don't you take a listen?
McConnell's had a habit over the last decade in the Senate of catering to the liberal Republicans who feel very emboldened under him. He always makes the conservatives the bad guy. It was always Ted Cruz's fault, Rand Paul's fault, Mike Lee's fault for things not happening. Well, now we're showing and seeing that it's the liberal Republicans in the Senate he's coddled all these years who are betraying him. Probably time for a new Senate leader on the Republican side. McConnell seems to be out of ideas on how to advance the agenda, and he doesn't seem to be willing to even push the president's agenda in the slightest. If the Republicans put a skunk up as Senate Republican leader, they would probably get more people coming to hang out with the skunk than with Mitch McConnell. He's not a popular guy.
Well, with all due respect to our friend Eric there, I would ask one person whether or not McConnell is effective. Merrick Garland. He was Obama's Supreme Court nominee, and Mitch McConnell effectively kept him blocked, got Neil Gorsuch in there, kept that seat warm in 2016 as Mitch McConnell brought the president in. Now, he failed on health care.
Yeah,
but now
so being in
the stakes are high.
Minority is very different than
he delivered the greatest accomplishment many conservatives believe, I think it's fair to say, is the appointment of Justice Neil Gorsuch. And Mitch McConnell was the guy that blocked Merrick Garland.
Good. Congratulations. However, if Steve Bannon has already... Steve Bannon already won this argument. The grassroots are sick of establishment Republicans who cater, as Eric Erickson said, to liberal Republicans, to Susan Collins and these other types, Lisa Murkowski, who are barely Republicans. If you can't be for repealing an individual mandate, making people buy health care, then why are you a Republican? Stand up and be counted. If Mitch McConnell had his way, we would never have had Rand Paul or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, because they supported liberal Republicans opposed to those primary. Mitch McConnell is part of the problem, not the solution. Steve Bannon has litigated this in the court of public opinion. He has won it on the ballot box.
And now it's playing out in Alabama.
Who would you like to see then? Because this is always the problem with leadership, is once someone steps down.
Even
remember how hard it was to find Speaker Ryan to step forward and do this? So
well, John Cornyn is in leadership.
But
he's the number 2 guy. He's the majority whip of the Senate.
Yep.
Well, okay, so you know who I really want to hear from? So we had talked to you guys earlier and asked for your thoughts on some of this stuff. So I want to read, Terry, you emailed us and said, concerning taxes and health care, get it done or get out.
That's right.
Pretty tough there.
Pretty strong, pretty clear. Email from Rudy said, time for McConnell to go. Cleaning up the swamp ought to start with the swamp leader.
And this from Rachel, drain the swamp, get rid of McConnell. And I just need to come full circle with our conversation. Since we've been talking, and I'm arguing with Peter.
Were you about raising the roof, or were you about
I'm being texted from my lovely wife of 19 years, Kathleen, who says, stop raising the roof.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
So I've lost that. Now, turning more to your headlines this morning. As we go. Family and friends gathering to say their final goodbyes to a Texas Border Patrol agent whose cause of death remains a mystery. 36-year-old Rogelio Martinez laid to rest during a private funeral service in El Paso, Texas. The husband and father of 5 succumbing to traumatic injuries after responding to activity along the U.S.-Mexico border. The incident is being investigated as a potential assault. I'm not entirely sure he's a father of 5. I know he has an 11-year-old son.
Well, and we were talking about this earlier, but President Trump is returning to Washington soon after today after spending the holiday in Florida. While down south, an angry driver tried cutting off his motorcade. White House media following the trail of vehicles say local police pulled over the erratic red van. I mean, can you even imagine this? The driver making obscene gestures and screaming several expletives. Sounds like a very friendly person. This follows a similar incident last month when a bicyclist flipped off the motorcade in Virginia, and she was subsequently fired as a result.
Yeah. It's like that scene in Fish Called Wanda where the guy's like always yelling.
I don't flip people.
I don't get it either. Well, the Department of Justice coming to President Trump's defense as confusion grows over who's in charge over the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. The DOJ says the president has full authority, citing the Federal Vacancies Act of 1998, to name White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney as the acting director. White House Director of Legislative Affairs Mark Short joined us earlier defending that choice.
It is absolutely a political agency that has been looking to kill jobs in America. It needs reform. Mick Mulvaney will do an outstanding job there on an interim basis until we appoint a full-time director.
Trump's appointment came hours after outgoing director Richard Cordray named his own successor, defending it by citing the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act. So we'll see tomorrow who gets the big seat.
And a rough Saturday for the University of Alabama in a state rival, Auburn, handing the top-ranked Crimson Tide their first loss of the season. Auburn, however, was fined $250,000 for violating post-game celebration rules, and a brawl leads to the Bama basketball team playing with just 3 players for the final 10 minutes of last night's game against Minnesota. You hear that, Pete? Alabama only losing by 5 points despite having several players ejected.
I'm a Tennessee fan, so I'm not upset about that.
There's a lot happening there with Alabama.
So they got so many guys ejected that it was 5-3 for the last 10 minutes. Minnesota's a good team this year as well. I didn't see this game. They still only won by 5?
I'll tell you.
Wow.
True, but that football game, I watched it last night. Alabama really fell apart. They were number 1. Number 2, Miami lost. So the college football race is heating up. It's very exciting for those who
Lisa's going to bring more of your
those of us who are college football fans. All right, guys, we are just days away from the FBI's confidential informant testifying before Congress about Uranium One. So what can we expect? Sarah Carter has been following this story from the joins us next.
And a teenager is honoring and comforting the families of the fallen with a teddy bear. Her mission is very cool and incredible. You will hear from her just ahead. An FBI informant set to reveal bombshell testimony on the Uranium One deal in the coming days. He's reportedly gathered years of evidence tying Hillary Clinton to the Russian controversy. This as the House Intel Committee accuses the firm behind the anti-Trump dossier of potentially paying journalists for positive coverage.
Investigative reporter Sarah Carter has been following these scandals since the beginning, and she joins us live now. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Lisa.
Sarah.
So, Sarah, this issue, the Uranium One, it's pretty convoluted. So can you tell us just in a nutshell, what are your main concerns about what you've heard and what you've seen and what you've reported?
Well, if we're looking at the case as a whole, I think what's going to be most fascinating is November 28th, first of all, is the Department of Justice is going to brief the House Judiciary as well as the Senate Judiciary on the original criminal case, which was that case that they brought against Vadim Mirkarin and other people associated with the Russian nuclear arm of Rosatom. That's both American co-conspirators and them. But what's most interesting about this case is the fact that the informant, William Campbell, had years of evidence that he collected at the same time beyond the criminal case that will show exactly how Russia wanted to penetrate the U.S.-American energy market. And that's where everybody is. That's the interest right now. That's what the House wants to know. That's what the Senate wants to know, both the House Intelligence Committee and House Oversight Committee. How far did the Russians go to try to penetrate the U.S. energy market? And it goes far beyond Uranium One and the purchase of Uranium One. And that's what William Campbell will be able to provide to Congress.
And
go ahead.
Well, just real quickly, Sarah, the 3 committees looking at 2 in the House, 1 in the Senate, but it was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, that had to fight to get this witness's testimony. Actually, had to subpoena some things. Is it your sense that this was going to remain out of sight but for Chuck Grassley?
I do. And remember, Chuck Grassley, Senator Grassley, as well as Victoria Tonsi, his attorney, really fought the Department of Justice as well as the FBI to lift that non-disclosure agreement. Had they not lifted that non-disclosure agreement, which was very specific, I mean, it was a criminal act if he spoke out publicly before they lifted it. If they had not lifted that, none of this information would be out there.
Absolutely. And what do we know about what we might learn as far as, because the excuse so far amongst the Obama administration is we didn't know or we weren't privy to this information. What might be revealed about how much was shared across government, about what the Russians were trying to do while the decision was being made about allowing them to make this purchase?
Well, according to the documents that I've reviewed, not just the documents, there's recordings, there's video recordings. They were very well aware of what the Russians were doing and how the Russians were planning on doing it. And by the way, how they successfully did it in their bid to get approval for the sale of Uranium One. So right now, the Obama administration and members of the Obama administration can act like they didn't know anything, but we are well aware that they did know. And
Sarah,
in fact,
why would they then approve it? That's the million-dollar question.
And not let Congress know either, or we don't know if they let the CFIUS committee know as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. Well, because, you know, they were trying to reset with Russia. This was a big deal for President Obama then, and this is why I keep emphasizing that this goes far beyond Hillary Clinton. This was a big deal for President Obama to reset relations with Russia, and he thought that by kind of bending over to the Russians, and this is according to people that I've spoken with, that he would kind of reset that relationship. And in fact, it was the Russians all along, particularly President Vladimir Putin, who was not really interested in resetting that relationship. He was interested in global Uranian dominance. That's what he wanted.
Sarah, we got to leave it there. Just a quick yes or no answer. Should Secretary Clinton be worried about what we hear on Tuesday?
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. You're always informative.
Too, and she delivered.
She did. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Carter.
Appreciate your time.
Great. Coming up, a shocking case of brutality from MS-13. This teen, now accused of stabbing a man more than 100 times with his fellow gang members. Is enough being done to stop them? One sheriff here to sound off next.
And are you heading out to get your Christmas tree today? You'll want to bring some extra green with you. Now, that's a tease. I don't even know what it means, but you're going to find out on the other side.
Welcome back. Now for some quick headlines for you. Deliberations expected to resume tomorrow in Kate Steinle's murder trial. Jurors must decide whether Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez, an illegal immigrant who was deported 5 times, intentionally fired a gun on a San Francisco pier in 2015, or whether Steinle's death was a tragic accident. And the Supreme Court taking up a landmark case regarding access to cell phone data this week. At issue is whether or not obtaining personal information like location history requires a search warrant. Lawyers for convicted robber argue that the 1986 law that allows police officers to retrieve those records is outdated. Griff?
Thanks, Lisa. This week, a 19-year-old member of the violent MS-13 gang is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He is the first of as many as 10 gang members believed to have stabbed a man more than 100 times in a Maryland park before decapitating him, removing his heart, and burying him in a shallow grave. In the last month alone, 35 MS-13 members were arrested in Maryland as part of a national effort to crack down on the gang. But is enough being done? Joining me now, Sheriff Chuck Jenkins of Frederick County, Maryland. No relation, Sheriff, but tell me, now let's set the stage. Montgomery County, where this happened, is right next to Frederick County, where you are. It's just north of the nation's capital, but you have an incredible exploding MS-13 problem. How bad is it?
Good morning, Griff. That's correct. We do have an increasing problem. It's a real crisis going on right now in this region. Montgomery County, which for all intents and purposes is a sanctuary county, that's now being felt in my county, which is just west of of Montgomery. So, you know, these vicious, savage crimes that are perpetrated in our streets and our communities, they can't be tolerated. We have to do more.
Now, tell me, because we have talked much in the nation about the sanctuary city issue that's playing out there and how it is hurting your ability to go after these horrific killers.
Well, Maryland is not yet a sanctuary state. There's a movement toward that. It's been attempted twice in the past couple of years. We've managed to stop it in the legislature. It's coming again this year, and we have to fight it. But what it does is ties the hands of law enforcement and corrections and jails in the sense that once we arrest someone, Not so in Frederick County, but once a jurisdiction arrests someone, they can't cooperate with ICE, and ICE can't do their job by deportation. So let me mention a very similar crime occurred in Frederick County back in spring of this year, where an individual MS-13 member was lured to Frederick County, beaten to death, and the attackers tried to cut his head off with a machete, buried in a shallow grave. So this is not limited to Montgomery County or any metropolitan area. It's in our counties, in our communities.
That's right. So you have groups like Help Save Maryland, some others in the last two battles over the state lawmakers' efforts to make Maryland a sanctuary state. And just for our viewers, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution says that federal law does not require state and local officers to enforce federal immigration law. But you say that you need every tool you can to combat what is being imported from places like El Salvador, some of the most horrific violence humanity has seen in your neighborhoods and your communities.
Absolutely. As Sheriff Griff, I have an obligation to use every tool at my disposal, every program at my disposal to keep our streets safe. In Frederick County, we belong to and participate in the 287G program. And over the course of 9 years in that program, we have removed over 1,400 criminals from our streets. More than 90 were affiliated with criminal gangs, such as MS-13, 18th Street, the Latin Kings. We need to clean up our communities. And the only way to do this is to cooperate and partner with ICE to let them do their jobs.
Sheriff, is President Trump and this administration enough of a partner for you to do what you need to do to keep those streets safe?
I think we're moving in the right direction, Griff, but we need to do more. We need to treat MS-13 and the other criminal gangs as international terrorist organizations, such as we do ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban. Get these people off the streets, out of our communities, jail them at Guantanamo or someplace safe until we can get them into the courts and get them removed from our country. We need to do a lot more. You know, I commend the president for what he's done so far. We need to secure our borders completely, and we need to wage war against these criminal gangs.
Sheriff Chuck Jenkins, thank you for taking time. Thank you for your officers being out there every day. Thanks for taking time.
Thank you.
Now, the mainstream media is spending yet another week bashing President Trump.
The president off the rails because he isn't getting enough thanks.
He has infested and deformed an entire national political party.
But a new poll says the American people are tired of it. So why does the media continue with this unhinged coverage? I don't know. And you know how some people just can't keep their cool? Turns out being angry can be really bad for your health. We are going to tell you all about it and probably tell you to chill out, relax, maybe even raise the roof.
Christmas season is a great time to be in New York. Sure.
And it's so beautiful, especially when they put the tree up in Rockefeller Plaza.
I think that's going to happen this week.
But it might be more expensive this year, Griff.
And the White House, actually tomorrow, the White House comes to, the Christmas tree for the White House comes and gets decorated, and it's a big thing. That's tomorrow.
So I went to Rockefeller Plaza for the first time last year when I came up, and it was so cool. I felt like such a tourist. It was not an original idea. There were a lot of people there, but it was very cool to see it, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I highly recommend it if people get a chance.
The reason I mentioned why that Christmas tree might be more expensive is there's a nationwide Christmas tree shortage.
There's a point to what we're talking about.
That's right. We could apparently 10 years ago during the financial crisis, during the downturn, there were less trees planted. It takes about 10 years for a Christmas tree to be mature enough to be chopped down and put in your living room. And so this year, because of that shortage, basic supply and demand tells us that if you have less of it, it's going to cost you a little bit more. So you might be shelling out, I don't know, another $10, $15 this year for your Christmas.
So what would you pay? What do you, like 50, 60, $75?
You can't put a price tag on Christmas.
What would you really pay?
I've actually never gone Christmas tree shopping because there was an allergy in my family growing up, so we always did a fig tree. So I don't really have a good context.
It's a good, honest answer.
Yeah, so I don't really have good context as to how much.
Well, we should ask our audience too.
Yeah, but we want to know what you think.
FoxNews.com. How much have you seen Christmas trees cost this year, and what are you willing to pay? Now, you're a father too. I can't buy just one, right? I've got to get the Charlie Brown tree. I got to get the. I got to get. I have two daughters, so I got two.
Down ones.
No.
Which Griff was creating. If you guys watched yesterday, Griff was creating his own upside down tree. By accident, you actually broke the beautiful tree, but Yeah, so that's what they look like. Apparently, what they were saying yesterday, isn't it like $1,000?
$1,042 Target selling an upside-down Christmas tree.
Would you guys spend that much on an upside-down tree? Let us know.
Not. And on the island of Manhattan,
I wouldn't spend that much. I can say that.
This is where we always have to get outside of our bubble here. The island of Manhattan, it's going to cost you $100 on a street corner to buy a crappy tree that barely unfolds. Out in Middle America, where you can chop down your own, which I've done many, many times, you're probably paying a little bit less. So let us know, in the real world, are you paying less or more? Friends at FoxNews.com, because here we're always paying more on the island.
New York is expensive.
It just goes up.
All right, we look forward to hearing from you. Let's turn now to some headlines. A bloody Thanksgiving in Chicago. 5 men killed and at least 24 others wounded in shootings over the holiday weekend. The violent spree comes after last year's Thanksgiving weekend saw 8 people fatally shot and more than 60 others injured. According to the Chicago Tribune, there have been 618 murders in Chicago this year.
And Senator Al Franken expected to speak to reporters today about the sexual harassment allegations against him. The Minnesota Democrat, who's been accused by 4 women, says that he does not intend to resign for the United States Senate. Senator Franken, in his latest apology Friday, says he's committed to regaining the trust of his constituents, admitting that he, quote, crossed the line for some women. You think?
You think? The daughter of a Florida police sergeant is keeping the memory of fallen officers alive, creating the nonprofit organization called Blue Line Bears. 15-year-old Megyn O'Grady making teddy bears from the actual uniforms of fallen officers, each with their own badge sewn on. O'Grady and her family, her father, who's a police officer himself, joins us earlier to tell us about them. Take a listen.
It has the patches of the uniform, and then we take off the buttons from the the button-down shirt, and we make them the eyes and the nose. And we keep the patches on the arms, and we keep, if they have hash marks.
Well, from what I understood, when we aired this segment earlier in the show, we crashed the website of support for this. To learn how you can support this great organization, go to the Blue Line Bears Facebook page. Blue Line Bears Facebook page, you'd be giving to a very important cause.
What an impressive young woman.
And keeping your cool is a problem for many people, but a new study says it could be life-threatening. State University finding that angry men between the ages of 20 and 40 were 1.5 times more likely to be dead 35 years sooner than those who were calmer. Scientists say it's due to several factors linking stress to physiological damage.
Don't be angry, guys.
And those are your headlines.
I'm calming down.
I bet Rick is not angry about the weather.
I'm not angry usually, but stressed sometimes. Wait, 20 times more likely to die.
Time and a half.
1.5 times more likely.
35 years sooner.
Wow.
What happens
is like margin of error.
So don't worry, be happy.
What happens is apparently you release adrenaline into times of stress, and it somehow impacts your DNA. But basically, people who are upset in this political enviament may really be putting their risks of life. I am not raising the roof.
If it was 1 or 2 years earlier, I'd be like, all right, that's fine. I'll speak about 35.
Yeah, that's legit.
That's legit. All right, so we've got a little bit of weather going on, but today's kind of that last day of people returning back home. Not that bad at all. A little bit of snow going here across parts of New England. This is not going to amount to much. Maybe a little bit of slick roadways, especially some bridges and overpasses. So be careful out there. The rest of the country, you're looking good. We have kind of a quick little thing. We call it a Pineapple Express. It's where we have moisture that's coming all the way from Hawaii up towards the coast of the U.S. And we have that going on right now. And so some spots are going to see some pretty heavy rain there across the western part of the U.S. And that's kind of our only spot today of some travel problems. This is a future radar. Goes all the way through Monday. You'll take a look at that. Some snow coming to the Sierra Nevada. Some good news for skiers. And by tomorrow, maybe even a little bit of rain into Southern California, which is always beneficial.
True.
Always.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. All right, coming up, Facebook shutting down this small business ad, promoting American flags. Why? Because the shop also sells guns. One of the store's managers will join us live.
Got to hear that one. And the so-called mainstream media, it's actually the left-wing media, spending yet another week bashing President Trump.
The president off the rails because he isn't getting enough thanks.
He has infested and deformed an entire national political party.
Yes, please tell us more. But a new poll says the American people, well, they're tired of it. So why is it still happening? Can they just not help themselves? We'll bring it to you.